he was born with a brother. The brother was already gone. January 8, 1935, East Tupelo, Mississippi. 4 in the morning, below freezing. Gladys Presley was in labor with 2 sons. Boys they had not known were coming in pairs. The midwife felt it first. Something in the way Gladys moved told her the birth was not finished. She urged the doctor to stay. His fee for the night, for both babies, would be $15. Jesse Garon Presley entered the world at 4 a.m. He did not cry. He did not breathe. Already gone. Elvis Aaron Presley arrived at 4:35 a.m. He cried. The sound filled the room. Outside, nothing moved. Inside, one baby breathed for 2. There was no coffin. Jesse Garon was placed in a shoebox, tied with a red ribbon. He was carried to Priceville Memorial Gardens. The grave was left unmarked. A family with nothing to spare. Gladys held Elvis through that first night with a grip that would never fully loosen. She had buried one son before sunrise. She would not lose the other. What the grief did to her was visible to anyone who looked. What it did to Elvis, that would take longer. Gladys came to believe. When one twin died, the one that lived got all the strength of both. She said it not as comfort. She said it as instruction. Elvis heard it as a command. He grew up as an only child. That was the official story. The truth. He grew up as half of something that should have been whole. Gladys told him to live for both. 4 words that became the architecture of everything he would ever do. Every song, every performance, every desperate act of generosity. Every night he could not sleep. She kept Elvis close, the way you keep something you almost lost. When she worked the fields, she dragged him in a sack beside her, infant Elvis against her hip while she picked. The closeness was grief made practical. She would not let him out of her sight. There was a cemetery path near Tulip Creek that cut through the woods toward the fields. When they walked it together, Elvis always wanted to stop. He wanted to pass through. He wanted to see Jesse. Osborne watched Elvis stand at the grave in silence. Not bored, not distracted, something deeper. The silence of a boy who understood something enormous was owed to this place. Then he walked on. He never explained it to Osborne. He didn't explain it to anyone. Elvis carried Jesse the way you carry something that belongs to no conversation, too far inside for words. Back in the shotgun house, music was already happening. The church rang with sound equal parts celebration and mourning. Voices lifting because it was the only direction. Elvis heard it as a child, and something in him recognized the frequency. That church sound, the ache underneath the joy, sorrow, and ecstasy in the same breath. It was the first musical education he ever received. He only knew it felt like the truest thing. In 1948, the family moved from Tupelo to Memphis. 13 years old. A new city, a new school. What they didn't know? He left something behind. Something that didn't move when you moved. A grave with no headstone in Priceville Memorial Gardens. He would spend his life finding ways to return. Memphis was louder than Tupelo. More music in the streets, more people, more noise. But Gladys's voice was still the one Elvis heard above everything. Live for both. It never went away. Summer, 1953. Elvis Presley, 18 years old, walked into 706 Union Avenue, Memphis. Sam Phillips's recording service. A storefront studio. A single recording booth. He paid $4. He said it was for his mother. That may have been true. It was not the whole truth. Marion Keisker listened while the machine recorded. She wrote a note. Good voice. See if I can find a song. She filed it away. That note was the difference between the world that existed and the world that came next. Sam Phillips had been looking for something he couldn't fully name. He was searching for a white man with the Negro sound and feel. Said it so often his staff could repeat it. He did not know yet what he was actually listening for. What he was listening for was grief that had learned to sing. He didn't know that then. He would learn it slowly, through take after take, session after session. One boy from Tupelo, coming back to the studio as if the answer to something was hidden in the walls. July 5th, 1954. A session not going anywhere. Elvis recording carefully, politely, controlled. The sound was correct, but it was empty. Phillips could hear the absence of something he couldn't identify. During a break, Elvis picked up his guitar and started playing. Not a session song. Fast and loose. He wasn't performing. He was playing for himself, or for someone who wasn't in the room. Phillips heard it through the open door. He stopped, he said, "Back up, find a place to start, do it again." They recorded it. When the tape played back, the room changed, the way air changes before a storm. Phillips heard yearning mixed with humility and intense determination. He heard it clearly. He could not name its source. What they didn't know in that room, what Sam Phillips couldn't have known, was what the yearning was for. Elvis had been singing toward a grave with no headstone since before he could name it as a thing he was doing. That quality Phillips heard, that wound inside the music, that was Jesse Garon. It had always been Jesse Garon. The world came fast after that. By 1956, the name was everywhere. Radio, magazine covers, 50 million lips. The boy from Tupelo became something the boy from Tupelo would never have recognized. He performed for audiences with no ceiling. Tens of thousands reaching toward him, calling his name. What the audience heard was electricity. What they couldn't hear was what it cost. That's what they never wrote about. What Linda Thompson finally said years later, quietly. Elvis told her he was intensely lonely on the inside. Intensely, not sad, not isolated. Intensely lonely. The kind of lonely that doesn't go away when the room fills up. The kind that gets worse. What the audience heard was a man performing for them. What Elvis felt was a man performing for someone not there. 50,000 in the seats. The one person he was really singing to had never heard a single note. He gave things away. Cars, cash, jewelry, houses. Strangers would mention a need and Elvis would hand it over before the sentence was finished. Generosity doesn't explain the compulsion, as if something could be repaid that could never be repaid. Dr. Peter Whitmer spent years studying what Jesse's death had done to Elvis. He called it the twinless twin experience. Survivor's guilt that becomes the bedrock, the driving force of a life. The impossible arithmetic. One life where there should have been two. Whitmer wrote that Jesse Garon was a restless spirit haunting all of Elvis's relationships, not theatrically, as a shape. The shape of someone who should have been in every photograph, every room, every song. In 1964, Larry Geller came into Elvis's life as his hairstylist. He stayed for something else. Elvis began to open up. About Jesse, about what Jesse was. Geller noticed something that stopped him. Elvis spoke about his twin in the present tense. "Do you know, Larry, I have a twin brother." Not had, have. His name is Jesse Garon. He was stillborn. Geller understood without needing explanation. Jesse Garon had never died inside Elvis Presley. Elvis asked Geller the question he'd carried since the shotgun house on Old Saltillo Road. Why was he born dead and not me? He never got his chance to live. Why was I the one chosen? Then, quietly, these kinds of questions tear my head up. Graceland is large enough to get lost in. Elvis had filled it with people. Family, friends, the entourage that never fully went away. In the hours before morning, the house had a silence no people could fill. He moved through it built for two. He talked to Jesse at night. That much is documented. Not metaphorically. He spoke to him the way you speak to someone in the next room. He believed Jesse heard him. The brother who never took a breath was, by Elvis's private accounting, still present. There is a cenotaph for Jesse Garon in the meditation garden at Graceland, placed there after Elvis's death. It is not Jesse's actual grave. Nobody could find that. After Elvis died in 1977, Vernon went to Priceville to find Jesse's burial site. He searched. He could not find it. That is what the Jesse Garon story is. A search that never finds what it's looking for. The wound does not close. The wound is the point. Every song was a message. That is the reading this story proposes. It is not metaphor. When Elvis sang about love and loss and the ache of wanting something just out of reach, he was drawing on the oldest source. The boy in the shoebox, the grave with no headstone, the brother who never was. Sam Phillips heard yearning and called it a quality. The twinless twin support groups that gathered at Graceland every year called it grief. Elvis called it Jesse. They were all describing a sound made only by someone singing to the unhearing dead. The shotgun house at 306 Old Saltillo Road still stands. The street has been renamed Elvis Presley Drive. Tourists walk through 2 rooms where Gladys held 1 baby instead of 2. They see poverty. They see plainness. What they don't see, the invisible presence in every room. The mandate that came with it, live for both. What nobody wrote in the obituaries. Elvis spent his last years talking every night to someone who never spoke back. He said, "I have a twin brother," present tense, not past. That was not a slip of grammar. Jesse Garon was still there, in the yearning, in the unmarked grave, in every song, in every room, just slightly too empty.